Indian Railways is the fourth largest national railway system in the world by size and total route length. The history of Indian Railways is more than 160 years old. The Indian government owns and operates Indian Railways. A monopoly on the nation's rail transportation was held by Indian Railways until relatively recently. Around 750 million tons of freight are transported on one of the world's busiest and biggest rail networks each year, carrying little over 6 billion people. Indian Railways employs more than 1.6 million people worldwide, making it the largest commercial or utility employer. Welcome to India Unveiled, and in this episode, we'll be talking about Indian Railways. So let's dive into episode 30, the Indian Railways on India Unveiled. The history of Indian Railways dates back to over 160 years ago. On 16th April 1853, the first passenger train ran between Boribundur, Bombay, and Thane, a distance of 34 km. It was operated by 3 locomotives named Sahib, Sultan, and Sindh, and had 13 carriages. Indian Railways is a statutory body under the ownership of Ministry of Railways of the Government of India that operates India's national railway system. As of now, it manages the 4th largest national railway system by size with a running track length of 104,647 kilometers and route length of 68,426 kilometers, of which 60,451 kilometers is electrified. With more than 1.2 million employees, it is the world's 9th largest employer and India's 2nd largest employer. Post-Indian independence, the Indian Railways was formed by the amalgamation of 42 different railway companies operating the Dominion of India. Now, what is Dominion of India? The Dominion of India, officially the Union of India, was an independent dominion in the British Commonwealth nations. A dominion was any of several largely self-governing countries of the British Empire. So, by the amalgamation of 42 different railway companies, spanning a total of 55,000 kilometers, the railway network across the country was recognized into 6 regional zones in 1951-52 for administrative purposes, which was gradually expanded into 18 zones over the years. The first steam-operated railway operated in 1837 in Madras, now Chennai, with the first passenger operating in 1853 between Bombay and Thane. In 1925, the first electric train ran in Bombay on DC traction. For non-science background people, let me describe the DC traction. DC means direct current, is a one-directional flow of electric charge. An electrochemical cell is the prime example of DC power. Now, the first locomotive manufacturing unit was commissioned in 1950 at Chittaranjan, known as Chittaranjan Locomotive Works, CLW. It is an electric locomotive manufacturer based in India. The works are located at Chittaranjan in Asansol Sadar subdivision of West Bengal, with an ancillary unit in Dankuni. The first coach manufacturing unit set up was in Madras in 1955. Indian Railways runs various classes of express, passengers and suburban trains. In 2018 and 19, it operated 13,523 trains on average daily, covering 7,325 stations and carried 8.44 billion passengers. Indian Railways also operates different classes of rail freight transport. In 2022-23, it operated 8,479 trains on average daily and transported 1,418.1 million tons of freight. Indian Railways operates multiple classes of rolling stock. Now it's rolling stock. In the rail transport industry, it refers to railway vehicles including both powered and unpowered vehicles. For example, locomotives, freight and passenger cars, and non-revenue cars. Passenger vehicles can be unpowered or self-propelled, single or multiple units. And these rolling stock are manufactured by self-owned coach production facilities. As of March 2022, Indian Railways rolling stock consisted of 318,196 freight wagons and 84,863 passenger coaches. As of December 2023, Indian Railways had 10,238 electric and 4,543 diesel locomotives, amongst others. Now let's dive into the history of Indian Railways. 1832 to 1899. In 1832, the proposal to construct the first railway line in India at Madras was made. In 1835, a railway track was constructed between Red Hills and Chintadripet in Madras and became operational in 1837. It was hauled by a rotary steam engine imported from England and was used for ferrying granite. The Madras Railway was established in 1845 and the Great Indian Peninsular Railway was incorporated in 1849. Yes, as discussed before, railway in British government was distributed to different authorities in different areas. Let's talk about the Great Indian Peninsular Railway. The Great Indian Peninsular Railway, also known as GIPR, was a predecessor of the Central Railway and by extension the current state-owned Indian Railways, whose headquarters was at the Bori Bandar in Mumbai. Later, the Victoria Terminus and presently the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Terminus. The Great Indian Peninsular Railway Company was incorporated on 1st August 1849 by the Great Indian Peninsular Railway Company Act 1849, 12 and 13 of the Parliament of the United Kingdom. It had a share capital of £50,000. On 21st August 1847, it entered into a formal contract with the East India Company for the construction and operation of a railway line, 56 km long, to form part of a trunk line connecting Bombay with Khandesh and Berar. Khandesh is a geographic region in Maharashtra, India. It was made up of present Jalgaon, Dhule and Nandurbar district. It's also said that Burhanpur district of Madhya Pradesh was also a part of it. Berar province, also known as Hyderabad Assigned District, was a province of Hyderabad. After 1853, it was administrated by the British, although the Nizam retained the sovereignty over the province. So, East India Company for the construction and operation of a railway line 56 km long to form a part of trunk line connecting Bombay with Khandesh and Berar and generally with other precedences of India. The Board of Directors of East India Company appointed James John Berkeley as Chief Resident Engineer and Charles Buchanan, Kerr and Robert Wilfred Graham as his assistants. It was India's first passenger railway. The original 21 miles, 33.8 kilometers section opening in 1853 between Bombay and Tanna, now Thane and Mumbai. On 1st July 1925, its management was taken over by the government. On 5th November 1951, it was incorporated into the Central Railway. Incorporation in London. Incorporated as a company in 1849 with its head office in London, the Great Indian Peninsular Railway line was initially proposed for a length of 2,100 kilometers to connect Bombay with the interior of Indian Peninsula and to the major part of Madras, now Chennai, on the east coast. It was originally meant to connect the towns of Pune, Nashik, Aurangabad, Ahmednagar, Solapur, Nagpur, Akola, Umravati, now Amravati, and Hyderabad. It was meant for the purpose of increasing the export of cotton, silk, opium, sugar, and spices. The management committee consisted of 25 British men, including officials of the East India Company and banks in London, most of whom resided in Britain and some who had resided in India. If you want to know about the East India Company, head up to episode number 8. The 25-person board consisted of people such as John Stuart Wortley and William Hamilton, both MPs from Britain who became the company's chairman and deputy chairman. Frederick Ireton, cavalrymen such as Major Clayton and Major General Briggs, Bombay residents John Graham, Colonel Dickinson, Honorable Jagannath Shankar Seth. Jagannath Shankar Seth Murkute, 10th February 1803 to 31st July 1865, popularly known as Nana Shankar Seth, was an Indian philanthropist and educationalist. He was born in the wealthy Murkute family in Murbad, Thane. So high was his credit that Arabs, Afghans and other foreign merchants chose to place their treasures in his custody rather than with banks. He soon acquired a large fortune, much of which he donated to the public. He was one of the few founding members of the Great Indian Peninsular Railway, along with Sir Jamsetji Jijabhai and David Sasson. The list also included bankers such as John Harvey, Commercial Bank of London, and S. Jervis, Director of the London and County Bank, Lombard Street, and directors of other railway companies such as Richard Peterson, Chairman of the Northern and Eastern Railway Company, and Melville Wilson, Director of the Alliance Assurance Office. Now let's talk about the beginnings of railway in Bombay. An year after the passing of Great Indian Peninsular Railway Company Act in 1849, the first Bhumi Pujan was done of the first rail line at Sion on 30 October 1850 by the Chief Secretary of Bombay Government, John P. Vallabhbhai. The line was meant to be an experimental line between Bombay and Thane, now Thane, whose gauge was set at 5 feet 6 inches, 1676 mm, by Governor General Dalhousie in January 1851. The contract for this segment was handed to the contractors Favial and Fowler from Thane to Kalyan, today's Kalyan, to contractors George Wythes and William Jackson along with Jamsetji Dorabji Naigamwala. Work began, but was soon slowed down by heavy showers in October 1851. This was the same year the first locomotives for this line, locomotives GIP 128, were built at the Vulcan Foundry in England. Vulcan Foundry Limited was an English locomotive builder sited at Newton-le-Willows, Lancashire. Several problems were encountered. For instance, the laying of the line among the swamp at Sion, worker strikes, among others. Then there was a question of whether the experimental line be a single line or a double line. The contractor opted for a latter option, but there were other ideas. Doing this would have saved money. In the end, the government of Bombay asked to retain the double line option, owing to complications in contracts and finances. First locomotive. The following year, in 1852, Bombay received its first locomotive built by E.B. Wilson, the same firm that built Roorkee's locomotive, named Thomason. It was brought by sea to Bombay. The Bombay Telegraph of 17th February states that she had been landed 6 days, suggesting that the locomotive landed in Bombay on 11th or 12th February 1852. On its arrival, it was pulled down a public road by 200 coolies before it was put on the rails. This locomotive was named Lord Falkland. After that, the governor of Bombay, Lucius Bentinck Carey, who reportedly left the city on the eve of the occasion. It was stationed on a land in Baikula. This plot of land belonging to William Phipps, among others, was bought by a GIPR at a cost of rupees 4,000. This locomotive was tank engine, meaning that it had all its fuel, water and boiler on the same frame, not having an external tender wagon. 4 wheels were attached to the cranked driving shaft and placed in the center. The Telegraph further stated that the efforts made to prepare the loco for work by the end of the week. The locomotive had its first run on 18th February 1852 from its stationing at Baikula to Parel. Thousands crowded around the place, watching the loco at the entrance of its shed. The excitement was immense, with the natives amazed when the loco commenced its maiden journey. The engine started at walking speed, later traveling at 15 miles an hour, about 24 kilometers per hour. A crowd ran after the moving contraption, hardly leaving the tracks clear. The locomotive traveled 2 miles, which is 3.2 kilometers, between Baikula and Parel, waiting at its destination for some time. The second trip was completed, notably with the lady being among the passengers. On both trips, the loco was stopped briefly to correct some small matters. However, the engine was found to be in proper order. Around this time, there arose debates on what vocabulary be introduced for the railways in native languages. The natives had already started referring to railways in their language, some calling it agboat in terms of steamboats, Without proper words to describe the railway systems, even the 1854 translation of the Lardner's Rail Economy, translated by Krishna Shastri Bhatvedkar in Marathi, referred the railroads as Lokhandi Raste in terms of iron roads. Hence, even the name of the book was Lokhandi Rastyanchi Sanshipta Varnan, translated as a short account of iron roads. Some translations were soon suggested. The locomotive in a shed at Baikula drew crowds of thousands from over the city when it began its operations, sometimes carrying 12 wagons of ballast up the steep slopes, the natives standing in the way in astonishment. For the natives, it was a mesmerizing experience, for they had never seen such an immensity traveling on rails. Not satisfied by watching from sides, the crowds would come extremely close to the operating locomotive, only paving way when the loco came in few meters away. Police was ordered around the line for the safety of the observers. Finally, 12 men with sticks were employed for this duty. Some people sought an opportunity, setting up stalls for toddy and cakes to sell to the visitors. The same year, 3 locomotives and the rail carriages arrived on the ship. Charles, along with 6 European locomotive drivers in September 1852. Now let's talk about the first trial run. The first trial run was conducted between Bombay and Thane on 18th November 1852 at noon. The locomotives and the carriages were still not yet in order, having arrived only 2 months ago. Hence, the same Lord Falkland was employed as the locomotive with trucks temporarily fitted to be used as carriages. The journey was to be commenced at noon, reaching the destination of Parsik, a point about 1 p.m. They were to have their tiffin in the tunnel built there, to later return back at sunset, as reported by the Allen's Indian Mail of 1852. The passengers were the engineers, directors, and their friends. The journey started soon after 12 p.m. Later, halting at near the beginning of the Salsette Island for refilling water. The entire journey was extensively described by the newspaper, the Bombay Times and Journal of Commerce, now known as the Times of India. The journey was reported completed in 45 minutes, the highest speed being about 80 km per hour, with the average being 48 km per hour. This journey soon paved way for the official run next year, 1853, on 16th April, that formally began the era of the Indian Railways. So, now 16th April 1853, 3:35 p.m. The first passenger train of the Great Indian Peninsular Railway left Boribandar station in Bombay, present-day Mumbai, for Thane. The train took 57 minutes to reach Thane. It covered a distance of 33.8 kilometers. 3 locomotives named Sultan, Sindh and Sahib of GIP-1 classification pulled the 14 carriages carrying 400 passengers on board. The portion of the line from Thane to Kalyan, present-day Kalyan, was opened on 1st May 1854. The construction of this portion was difficult as it involved 2 line viaducts over the estuary. On 12th May 1856, the line was extended to Kampuli, present-day Khopoli, via Palasthari. And on 14th June 1858, Khandala-Pune, present-day Pune, section was opened to traffic. The Palasthari-Khandala section involved the difficult crossing of the Bhori Ghat. Just a couple of years after the first train, the engineers of the railways took up the colossal task of building a track over Bhori Ghat, built at an elevation of 2,000 feet to connect Bombay with Pune, now Pune, with tunnels and reverse viaducts. The track was finally constructed over a period of 9 years and at great human cost. Before this was made, the 21-kilometer gap was covered by palanquin, pony or cart through the village of Kampuli, now Khopoli. The Kasara line was opened on 1st January 1861 and the steep Thul Ghat, today Thal Ghat, section up to Igatpura, present-day Igatpuri, was opened on 1st January 1865 and thus completed the crossing of Sahyadri. 1862, the Jamalpur workshop. The first railway workshop was established at Jamalpur, near Munger, Bihar, in 1862. It gradually became one of the major industrial units of India, with iron and steel foundries rolling mills, and more. In 1864, the North got its first station, the Delhi Junction, the oldest one of the city. It was a major station and junction and remains so till date. It was first established near Chandni Chowk in 1864 when trains from Howrah, Calcutta, started operating up to Delhi. The current building was made operational in 1903. The next important station in the north was Lucknow. It was the headquarters of the Oudh and Rohilkhand Railway, O&RR, whose first line from Lucknow to Kanpur was built in April 1867. Now known as Lucknow Charbagh Station, it is a part of Northern Railway. Bombay to Madras. Beyond Kalyan. Now Kalyan, the southeast main line proceeded with Borghat to Pune, Solapur, Raichur, present-day Raichur, where it joined the Madras Railway. By 1868, route kilometerage was 888 kilometers, and by 1870, route was about 2,388 kilometers. Bombay to Calcutta. Beyond Kalyan, the northeast main line proceeded over the Thul Ghat to Bhusawal. From Bhusawal, there was a bifurcation. One passed through the great cotton districts of Akola and Amravati and was extended up to Nagpur and then to Rajnandgaon, Durg district, and other was extended up to Jabalpur to connect it with Allahabad-Jabalpur branch line of the East Indian Railway, which had been opened in June 1867. Hence, it became possible to travel directly from Bombay to Calcutta. The Howrah-Allahabad-Mumbai line was officially opened on 7th March 1870, and it was part of the inspiration for French writer Jules Verne's book Around the World in 80 Days. Although, the novel it has erroneously claimed that the line passes through Aurangabad, which is again erroneously claimed as the capital of the Emperor Aurangzeb Alamgir. At that time period, line had not reached Aurangabad but rather moved northward after reaching Bhusawal towards Jabalpur. At the opening ceremony, the Viceroy Mayo, then known as Lord Mayo, concluded that it was thought desirable that, if possible, at the earliest possible moment, the whole country should be covered with a network of lines in a uniform system. By the end of 1874, the company owned 365 steam locomotives, 1,309 coaches and 7,924 goods wagons. In 1906, a steam rail car from Kerr, Stewart and Company was purchased. By 1936, the rolling stock had increased to 835 locomotives, 1285 coaches and more than 20,000 freight wagons. In 1880, the Darjeeling Steam Tramway, later the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway, started its first section between Siliguri and Kurseong. The line was extended to Darjeeling in 1881. The line operated on narrow gauge and was accorded World Heritage status in 1999. The first railway in Asia to get such a standing. Kalka Shimla Railway (KSR) joins Kalka to the foothill town near Chandigarh to Shimla at an elevation of 2,276 meters. This narrow gauge railway, 2 feet 6 inches, of 96.54 kilometers length opened for traffic on 9th November 1903. It was accorded World Heritage status in 2008. The Nilgiri Mountain Railway is among the first and still outstanding examples of hill passenger railway. Opened in 1899, it was extended up to Ooty in 1903. It was a bold and ingenious engineering initiative to establish a rail link across a mountainous terrain of great beauty. The engineering marvel still stands, a testimony to the skills of railway engineering. It was accorded World Heritage status in 2005. After 4 decades of importing British locomotive parts for assembly, in 1895 the first steam locomotive was manufactured completely in India at the Ajmer workshop. The locomotive F734 became part of the Rajputana Malwa railways and served both passenger and goods trains along central India. This lightweight design, which remained in service for 63 years, was the beginning of locomotive manufacturing in the country. So this was about Indian Railways on India Unveiled. I'll be creating one more part of this episode. So stay tuned. Did you like this episode? Did you gain some knowledge out of it? If yes, do let me know in the Q&A section. And don't forget to share this interesting and knowledgeable episode with your friends and families and all your loved ones. Do send your suggestions regarding this podcast or episode or anything related to this podcast. I'll see you real soon in the next episode. Till then, take good care of your health. This is Rakesh signing off from India Unveiled. Thank you for listening.